Hello, my name is Shadow. Welcome to Only Fails. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.
So, Shadow, what has been your experience with failure?
Failure? I've experienced a lot of failure in my life, I spent many years of my life failing repeatedly on end. It's at one point was a very, very frequent part of my life. It was an everyday thing. Failure was an everyday thing. It was an everyday thing to the point that I wasn't even able to determine failure from success. Everyday failures to me was just a normal everyday. So that's my experience mostly with failure.
What was your greatest failure?
My greatest failure? I don't know. It's hard for me to really determine what my greatest failure would be. My greatest failure would probably be when I was addicted to heroin and I lost custody of my son. I wasn't around for 2+ years of his life while I was addicted to heroin or either recovering from heroin. That was probably my greatest failure, was missing large portions of my son's life, and early in his development. Mm-hmm.
What was going on in your life when you started using?
When I started using heroin, there was a lot going on in my life. I was always a casual drug user. I used a lot of pills. I did a lot of fucking drugs. But when I started shooting heroin, I was around 22 years old. Basically, I had just gotten out of a relationship. I was heartbroken over this girl. I was living in my friend's extra bedroom, and basically I was frequently fighting with my son's mom, trying to get visitation, trying to be able to see him, and going through all the tribulations of that at such a young age. And all my friends around me at the time were doing drugs and shooting heroin. And so I started shooting heroin naturally, thinking that I could control it and thinking that, everything would work out. So that was like 8 years ago. Mm-hmm.
And how long did you use for?
I used heroin for about 5 years. I was a heroin addict, intravenous for 22 to 27. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you, when you used, how did you feel?
The first time you shoot heroin, it's probably like the most orgasmic feeling I've ever experienced in my life. It's like this warm, like sensation that crawls up your arm and eventually it hits your brain and your heart, and then everything slows down immediately. All your skin starts prickling with a sense of euphoria, and you start fading in and out, and it feels like 10 orgasms rushing up your arm in a way. It's very euphoric. It's ultimate bliss. I've always described it as basically, it wouldn't matter what had just happened to you throughout your life. You could be in the worst situations or just experience the worst trauma. But if you were to shoot a shot of heroin, none of that would matter and it would all go away. It is the absence of all negative emotion, So the first times you're doing it, it feels amazing and it feels amazing and it feels amazing and it keeps feeling amazing for quite a while. Eventually when the sickness starts, when you start getting sick about 2 weeks to 3 weeks in of doing it regularly, you get really sick. It gets to the point where eventually you just don't really feel the same without shooting heroin. You don't really have any energy, you're very lethargic, you're very grumpy, you're very depressed, you don't want to get up and do anything. But when you shoot heroin, then you feel alive again. And basically it's like a combination of heaven and hell. When you're sick and you don't have it, you feel like shit and you don't want to do fucking anything. But when you shoot heroin, you feel great and you're ready to go throughout your day, ready to do everything, talk to people, have all these things. And the reason it's like, one of the reasons it's so detrimental to your life and your well-being is because when you're on heroin, it doesn't matter what the conditions of your life are. You can be living in trap houses, on the streets, on the sidewalk. You can be, in the worst situations around the worst fucking people. And you feel like everything was absolutely fine because your brain is pulsing with euphoria and you are totally numb to whatever's going around you.
Yeah. Well, you touched on it briefly in the beginning, but what kind of damage did heroin do to your life?
What kind of heroin damage did heroin do to my life? Man, that is it completely changed me in ways that are hard to explain. And on the surface, the damage that it did to my life was, well, it forced me to basically become someone that I hated and sabotage all of the relationships that I had. You know, I stole from almost all of my friends, all of my family. I lied to them. I stole their stuff. I took it to the pawn shop. I sold it for dope. I did it to all my friends too. Um, I cheated people in just about every way that I could have without being, you know, without really getting caught as much as I think I would want, even though I ended up did getting caught. It destroyed my relationship with my mother, with my brothers, with pretty much my entire family. I lost my apartment because I couldn't pay my rent because I was so addicted to heroin. I even blamed that on somebody else instead of myself. I ended up living in a shelter. I lost custody of my son. I ended up losing my car because I couldn't pay to fix my car. I ended up living in a shelter for quite a while. I lost my job, you know. I lost a lot of things on the surface, most things that anybody would consider to be precious to them. I lost all sense of security. I lost all sense of attachment. I didn't feel close to anybody for a long time. I lost all my material possessions. And eventually I lost all my self-respect. Pretty much just about all of it. After that, you know, I think basically the effect that it had on my life is that it forced me to become a person that I had no respect for. It forced me to become someone that I hated. And the worst part about it is that I was so addicted to it that I didn't feel like there was anything that I could do about it. You know, everybody wanted me to get sober and wanted me to better myself, and for some reason I just never could. Um, it didn't really matter how many consequences I came across, how many bad things happened to me. All I would do was just use those as more excuses as to justify my self-destruction. Basically, using the conditions of my life to justify the nature of my sickness. When really, the conditions of my life were a symptom of the nature of my sickness. You see?
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by is that when you're a heroin addict and your whole life is shit, when you have sacrificed all of your love and connections and you don't have anybody that really cares about you or is close to you, and you don't have a job anymore, you don't have money in your pocket, you don't have a place to stay, you're just trying to stay warm, you're just trying to stay not sick, you're just trying to get a sense of, you know, relief in a fucking needle on a daily basis just so you can cope with the fact that, you know, you don't have anyone that cares about you anymore and you're living on the fucking streets. So, you know, that is the nature of the sickness. The hard part is that when you find yourself in these situations, when you have sabotaged everyone in your life and everything good in your life, and you find yourself in really desperate, fucking vulnerable situations, it's very hard to determine and take full accountability and realize why that happened to you. It's because nobody wants to accept the fact that how far they've fallen is directly a cause of how they have treated people and who they have allowed themselves to become. It is so much easier to blame the world, and it is so much easier to get by that way. But at the same time, it's hard to pull yourself out of those really dark places in life if when you look around, all you see is fucking, you know, shitty junkies and homeless people and fucking all your friends are junkies that are trying to two-time you just to get a fucking bag of dope, and you're doing the same for them. You know, when you're surrounded by people that, you know, are self-destructive by nature and don't really give a shit about themselves or anybody else, it's hard for you to inspire yourself enough to be able to be better than that. So That's what I mean. You know, the conditions of my life were in nature of my behavior and nature of my sickness and who I allowed myself to be. And it's very hard when you're in the middle of that to really separate that and take full accountability for that. And sometimes it takes years, you know, it takes a long time.
What did motivate you to decide to quit?
I mean, there's a million motivations to get sober, you know. It's a really tricky thing to address because like I think I wanted to get sober a long time before I actually did. And what I mean is that I don't think I was able to inspire enough hope in myself or have a concise, positive vision of the future of what my life could be in order to actually make that switch. You know, I think I identify so much with being the fucking junkie, the punk rock junkie, living on the fucking sleeping out of a backpack kind of shit. You know, I think I identified with it so much because it was hard for me to have hope for anything better. So there was a lot of motivation to get sober because nobody wants to wake up sick every day, and nobody wants to have to shove fucking needles in their arms on a daily basis, and you know nobody really wants to be that low down, and you know nobody really wants to live in a homeless shelter. Nobody really wants to do those kinds of things. And I sure as hell didn't want to lose custody of my son. I didn't want to lose my house. I didn't want to lose my car. I wanted to have the normal sense of love and security that everybody has. But apparently my love for heroin was greater. So I think what eventually motivated me to get sober is, well, I had several near-death experiences, several overdoses. I've been found in many public bathrooms. I've been dragged out of quite a few establishments on stretchers, brought to the ambulance. I've woken up in hospitals more than 5 or 6 times. Several near-death experiences that I barely survived from. And so I think the deciding factor is that eventually I just realized that it didn't matter how many consequences that I was dealt, how bad things got for me. I was just gonna keep using that as an excuse to feel sorry for myself and further justify my use. And then I eventually came to terms with the fact that I was going to die. You know, it's not as easy as a thing as people might suspect it to be. And the reason is because heroin and addiction is such a powerful disease that you can literally experience several traumatic near-death experiences, and you can wake it up and shake it off and shoot up right again and forget all about it, you know. And you can go back to living in the same shitty situations that you were in, and as long as you can get a steady injection, you'll be fine and you'll forget all about it. But then eventually, you know, as the months go by and the weeks go by and the injections become fewer and far between, you start to reality starts to set in. You start to realize that this shit kills motherfuckers, and you start watching your friends die. You know, you start seeing people go to prison, and eventually I had to come to terms with the fact that I was going to die. And when I died, I was never coming back. Nobody was ever going to see me ever again, and that was going to be my legacy. My legacy is I was just going to be another fucking junkie kid that overdosed in some bathroom and got pulled out and somebody found him, you know, or, you know, or somewhere in a fucking homeless shelter somewhere, or just somewhere on the street somewhere. That was going to be my life. And eventually I realized that, you know, getting sober was just really a matter of life or death. It was either I was going to live or I was going to die, you know, and it turns out that I really didn't want to die like that, you know. I don't want to die that to be my legacy, so that's fine.
When you were getting sober, did you have a good support system?
No, I didn't have any support system getting sober. I mean, maybe scratch that. Let me say that again. My family quit talking to me years and years ago, while I was homeless, while I was addicted to heroin. So I didn't really have any support from any of my family members when I got sober. But how I ended up getting sober is I ended up leaving the state and basically hitchhiking and traveling through a series of buses. And eventually I made it to Oakland, California, where I basically enrolled myself into a program. And I was in a live-in facility for over 10 months in the Salvation Army. And basically, during the coronavirus, completely cut off from the world. So I didn't have a cell phone, I didn't have access to the internet, I didn't have any money in my pocket. I was in the middle of another city and basically, under watch 24/7. So support, I guess I did have the support of the institution. I had the support of the Salvation Army. I was in a facility that kept me accountable and kept me sober and kept me alive. But as far as like support from friends and family, I didn't really have a lot of that, to be honest. And a lot of that reason is because I had already sabotaged all these relationships so heavily. I didn't really have any contact with them anymore. You know, my family quit talking to me because I treated them so poorly and I stole so much money from them. And I was so self-destructive that unfortunately, I didn't really have a lot of support from my friends or my family when I got sober. So no.
How are your relationships now?
Oh, I still don't have. Unfortunately, I still haven't really repaired my relationships with my family members. It's gotten to the point where I've been through so much in these past 5 years, or even more, 7 years, that I don't really necessarily feel as close to them as I used to. I kind of lost contact with them, and unfortunately, I haven't really repaired those relationships. I've repaired relationships with some of my friends from back when I was using. Some of them got sober and straightened up. Some of them didn't. I stay in contact with the ones that did mostly. But my relationship with my son is better than ever. I got custody of my son finally very recently. I have my own apartment now. I have my own job. And I have my son twice a week now. So that relationship has improved the most. And that's really, as of now, it's really the only one that's really that important to me. So,
That's good.
Yeah.
How hard was quitting?
How hard was quitting? I mean,
Was it the hardest thing you ever did?
I don't know if it was the hardest thing I ever did. I think quitting, quitting's, I think quitting's the easy part. Obviously, it takes a long time to actually be able to quit and actually be able to be done with it forever and be never again, never going back. And it's a process, but once you get there, that's the easy part. That's the first step. The hard part, the hardest thing I ever did was having to fucking recover from all the bullshit that I did while I was using. That's the hard part. The hard part is going forward and rebuilding your life from ground one. That's the fucking hard part. And having to live with all the haunting memories of all the fucked up shit you did, all the things that you had to experience, just having to be that person. And starting your life from ground one, I think, is the hardest part. And when I mean ground one, I don't mean like financially. I mean spiritually. I mean emotionally. I mean physically. I mean like when I finally decided to quit and had to rebuild myself and then rebuild my life, that was the hardest part. I had to rebuild my self-respect. I had to completely re-identify and re-evaluate who I was. I had to completely rebuild myself and re-identify myself, and it took me years. So quitting, I don't think, is the hardest part. I think that's the easiest part, and then the recovery that comes after that, and having to live with all of that shit and having to completely rebuild your life from the ground up, it's traumatic. It's not something that everybody gets to go through in their life, fortunately.
How do you see yourself now?
How do I see myself now? In hindsight, it's been a learning experience that has made me a better human. I'm a lot more in touch with my dark side than you could say than most people. And what I mean by that is, I've seen myself in a lot of desperate situations and a lot of dark places that maybe a lot of people haven't been there yet. And I'm not saying anybody should go there, but there's things that I know about myself that maybe not everybody does know about themselves. I know I didn't always know these things about myself. I didn't know. I didn't know how bad of a person I could really be, and at the same time, I also didn't know that there's only so far that I will go. So how I see myself now is I see myself now as mostly a very more experienced and intelligent person because of it. Um, there's a lot of life lessons that you learn through a lot of self-destructive behaviors that I feel, and when you find yourself in really desperate, low situations and you don't have anyone in your life that's really encouraging you or trying to pull you out of it, it takes a lot of discipline and willpower and patience to be able to really re-identify yourself and pull yourself out of whatever dark places that you're in. And the thing is, it takes years. It's not months, it's not a couple weeks, it took me years. And so how I see myself now is I basically see myself now as somebody that's been through more than I would have liked to be been through. Obviously, I'm not going to make the claim that I've been through more than other people, but I've been through more than I would have liked to go through. I learned a lot of hard lessons, a lot of hard ways, and I wish I would have made better decisions, but I I have found out I'm more resilient than I ever thought I could be, mostly just because of all the experiences that my addiction dragged me through.
If someone out there watching this was contemplating using heroin for the first time, what would you tell them?
I mean, why the fuck would you want to do that? It doesn't even make fucking sense why you want to fucking do heroin. I don't know. Okay, so the only reason that somebody would want to start doing heroin or smoking fentanyl or doing these things is because maybe you think it can't happen to you. Because that's what every motherfucker thinks. Everybody thinks that they're not going to get addicted. It's not going to consume them. They're not going to lose everything, Everybody that I ever fucking started doing drugs with thought that. And I thought the same thing. If you start shooting up heroin, it's gonna consume you. Your body is not meant to experience that much euphoria, and it will hijack you, and it will consume you, and it will consume your life. I've never met anybody that it didn't happen to. Some people got lucky. Some people didn't have to be homeless and go to prison or die on several occasions, but that's only because it didn't happen yet. And it's really just a matter of time. Everybody knows that when you start shooting heroin. It's only a matter of time before you are either homeless, you're dead, or you're in prison. And that's just a fact. Everybody knows that. Every junkie knows that. And we all know that. Every junkie knows that. So anybody that doesn't know that, that's the truth. I don't know why the fuck you'd want to do that to yourself. It's not worth it. I don't know why the fuck you'd want to do that.
What's next for you? What's the future hold?
I mean, I'm a professional chef, so basically what I spend most of my time doing, I'm a single father, a professional chef. So mostly when I'm not hanging out with my kid and playing video games with him and being a dad and shit like that, I'm making pasta, I'm cooking food, I'm making art projects and food. I cook fine dining food. So basically what's next for me is I spend a lot of time working on my culinary craft and being a dad. So that's really all I really care about at the moment. That's about it.
So your life is going well. That's good.
My life's going great now, and because I quit being self-destructive. And that's the secret to a good life, is don't be fucking self-destructive. It's really all you have to do. And it takes years and years sometimes to figure that out. And some people know it right away, but that's the truth. If you're not self-destructive, your life can only get better, And it took me like 27 fucking years to figure that one out. But that's the truth. So absolutely my life's going great because I haven't been self-destructive for over 4 years, And it's just a matter of time. And when you find yourself in these bullshit, shitty situations where you got nothing going for you, no one good in your life, it's just a matter of time. And all you can really do is the next right thing. That's the trick. The trick is you do the next right thing over and over and over and over and over for years and years and years, and eventually your life will get fucking better. That's how it works.
Yeah, that's a good message.
Yes, sir.
And that's the truth.
Yes, sir.
You got anything else you want to add?
No.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing your story. This takes courage and bravery,
Yeah.
and I appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate you too, bro.
Thank you.
So.